you can lose nothing and gain everything by going on a mission to those individuals who are thinking about going out. And it'll truly will bless and impact your life in ways you couldn't even imagine long after you came home.
Hey everyone, welcome back to LDS Mission Stories. I could not be more stoked for today's conversation. I have with me my boy Wes. Welcome, dude.
It's good to be here, man. It's been a long time.
I know.
Long time coming.
Yeah, for real. Wes is one of many people that I've been super excited to sit down with. I've heard parts of your story and who you are, and we've spent a little bit of time hanging out, and so much respect for you and what you do and what you stand for. And I know a lot of the way you live your life and the things that are important to you stem from serving a mission. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of it comes from that and the experiences you had out there. And so that's what I want to hear about is a little bit about you. If you want to tell the audience where you're from, and then the journey you went on to decide to go on a mission and kind of what that looked like. And you can highlight whatever moments you feel are important, and we'll start there.
Yeah. So I grew up in Spanish Fork, Utah until I was probably about, 14, 15, whatever. And then my mom got remarried to a guy down in Manti, moved down there.
Cool.
Went to Manti High School, Turkey Farms, the Manti Temple.
Yeah, dude.
Turkey Poop. That's like all
That's a good spot, though.
And, my parents were great. They were absolutely everything I needed. And, through the story of my life, my parents, got divorced when I was around 4. And, through no fault of their own, my mom was working multiple jobs. Life was hectic. I didn't know much about the gospel. We would go to church every once in a while, we'd go for spurts on Sundays and stuff like that, a couple Sundays in a row, and might miss whatever. I wasn't very involved in the church until, my senior year of high school. I was about to graduate, and I had just kind of this crisis where I had no idea what I wanted to do after high school. Wasn't doing good in school, wasn't good at school, didn't want to go to college, didn't think that was even a possibility. I wanted to play football. I was really good at football, but no one else knew that. I didn't have any accolades or offers or colleges talking to me or anything like that. And I was undersized, especially for the position that I played in high school at DN and coming from a 2A school. And that ultimately led me to a vulnerable enough place to where, I had cried out to God in prayer at times past, but I think I was finally susceptible enough to the Spirit to hear and receive an answer and realize that he was in fact there, and most importantly that he loves me deeply and he has a plan for me. And from there it was pretty easy for the direction of my life to be steered in ways that reflected and honored that truth of his existence. And I had a really good friend, mentor, teaching at the high school that convinced me to go on a mission. Not even really for spiritual purposes. It was a lot more about what it can do for you as a man and helping you mature. And so I ultimately elected to go on a mission, and I went out later than the rest of my friends. I had things that I had to, I was just later in getting my testimony and stuff than them. I went out for a year. It was great. It was wonderful. I learned so much, and then I ended up having to repent of some things when I was out for about a year, and I came home for 6 months. Went back out and finished, thankfully. And just like you said, it has influenced my life in ways that I could never imagine. I still almost feels like every single day there are bits and pieces and experiences of my mission that are revealed in my current lifestyle and current challenges and struggles that I'm going through. And that's, 8 years since I've been home. It's still happening every single day. So
yeah. Hey, dude. Well, thanks for sharing that. I want to highlight something you said, how, you had lived your life and maybe it was a a more casual relationship with the gospel, right? And the church or whatever you want to call it. But it was the moment where where you had humbled yourself and really sought guidance from God.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I mean, several people experience that after high school when life starts to get more real. And I think God is merciful in the way that he reveals answers to us or reveals his guidance, because he knows that we are going to act on an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think like growing up, your childhood, going through high school, like life is not that serious. Like you're just kind of hanging out, trying to figure it out. And, you make dumb decisions, but at the end of the day, like it's not that important in a lot of ways. And so, I mean, at least for me, like thinking back to high school years, like I was praying and I was maybe reading my scriptures, but it wasn't that intentional. And I think if I was seeking guidance, it wasn't like I was very, proactive about whatever answers I was receiving. And so I think as you're preparing for a mission or deciding whether or not to go on a mission or go to college or play sports, like in your situation, you have several different potential paths. You wanted to know which path, right? And you would act on whatever God gave you. What moments in that process were important to deciding to go on a mission, or rather, what experiences helped you understand that a mission was for you?
Yeah.
For someone who's maybe on the fence or trying to navigate that.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm, me having only read probably 11 or 12 chapters of the Book of Mormon even before I went out on my mission. Like I was, I literally knew nothing. And the bulk of, my desire was just that I was a scared little boy. I was scared of the world. I was scared of the future. I had no purpose really. I had no direction. And so I had seen other people, and obviously my mentor, Austin Soper, like helped me understand just how much direction and guidance it could give me. And that was an understatement, and it was really just like that fear of I didn't know what to do. And whatever I did choose to do, like, I thought very deeply about what it would mean anyways. Like, what is the purpose of this life? These great existential questions that, philosophers and people have thought of for thousands and thousands of years. I began to think those things, like, what is the purpose? Why am I here? Where am I going? Who am I? And all these different things. And I am so, so grateful I had the opportunity to go out on my mission and learn and experience that for myself, because, especially when you come home from your mission, like, your 2 years or year and a half are just a snapshot of your life. And they really just kind of put a microscope on you and yourself while you're out there, and serve as a constant reminder and kind of that path forward for when you come home, of not always where you're going to be, like, but where you always should be.
Yeah.
That's one thing I had to realize for myself when I came home, and, I realized I was still sinful.
Yeah.
I still succumbed to temptations. I still had vices that I thought once I had killed, that I didn't have to deal with on my mission and whatnot. And I come back here and it's still wrestling with the world.
Yeah.
And like, it's not about like how many times you cross the path or how many times you stray from it or whatever. It's literally just having the honesty within yourself to know where that path is, and, just never forsake it. Never turn your back from it. Realize that getting back to it, however many times like you cross it or stay on it, like, is irrelevant. Like, as long as you are in constant pursuit of that, and God will help you along the way.
Yeah. Love that, dude. It makes me think of recently just going through the Temple Recommend interview questions. What stood out to me a couple months ago when we we're having this conversation, and the word strive I think they added that, and it repeats it throughout several questions. Are you striving to keep the word of wisdom, and do you understand it? And are you striving to live an honest life? Whatever the formalized questions are. But I think that word strive has so much depth to it, and at the end of the day, that's all that God is asking of us. He's understanding and our nature as man, and we have temptations and we have vices, like you said, that are always a part of the world. And I think we have this misunderstanding that whether we have dealt with temptation or certain things, that it's something that you like overcome and just move on from. But I don't think that's necessarily how it is. I think we're always subject to the adversary, right? And whatever that looks like in our life, whether it's, even just idleness, I feel like is what we're most, at least for me, it's like just getting lazy with how we live the gospel or try to be like Christ. We're not intentional about it.
Yeah.
And anyway, there's so much we could cover here, but I'd love to hear kind of these principles we've touched on lightly through a story. A common theme with a lot of these conversations I have is how, you go out to teach people as a missionary, but you end up learning so much from the example of those that you meet. I'd love to hear maybe a story or two of people you might have interacted with on your mission that had an impact on you.
Yeah, I was so lucky and so blessed to have, some of the experiences that I have, and I've shared them on like some other podcasts and other clips I've posted. But the thing I want to say, just because I feel like I need to preface with like whatever I share, whatever others like stories or miracles that other people share on your mission, the one thing I regret leading up to and going out on my mission was being duped into thinking that the measure of my success as a missionary was dependent on the kinds of stories and the kinds of experiences that I had that sounded similar or looked like other people's.
Yeah.
And in reality, it's like if that's your metric, like hardly any of those things will ever be repeatable.
Right.
And again, you go out there with the belief that God will give you the exact experience, that you individually need.
Yeah.
And I can promise you, if you're willing to allow yourself to be moved and guided by the Spirit when you're out there, you will get to the end of your mission and you wouldn't want to have it any other way.
Absolutely.
You will literally end up hearing yourself tell other missionaries or people back home like stories of things that happen, and you realize they'll have the same reaction that you did when you heard other stories.
Yeah. And
it's like, holy cow, like that's it.
Yeah.
Like God was able to do that for me. And so, I spent probably the first couple months like comparing myself to like, oh, am I as successful as a missionary because I haven't stumbled upon like this huge family that just wants to get baptized and I dunk 8 people in a row on one day, or like any of these crazy things.
Right.
But probably the biggest one, like the guy that I've spent the most amount of time like even thinking about still to this day is this man named Cornelius Burrell, and he was originally from Louisiana, the Cajun dude. He was picked up his house picked up off the roof of his house during Hurricane Katrina. He, at the time that I found him, he was living in government housing in Houston. He had served probably 32 years of his 72 years of age in prison, starting from the time he was, I think, around like 14 or 15. In and out of jail, in and out of prison, just this, crazy track record of criminal history. And it wasn't like consecutively 32 years. It was just in and out, in and out. And I remember, like me and my companion, we're in downtown Houston. It was like the closest to downtown that you could get in our mission. It's called Melbourne. And we had Bible requests coming in at the time of like integrating iPads with missionaries and stuff. And we had Bible requests up to our ears. Like we had to just
Hmm.
There was probably about like 60 to 70 of them, like at any given day.
No
They were just
way.
sitting there. It was like you can't just go around the city and give out Bibles like all day long. You could never even get to them. And for whatever reason, like we had an appointment fail on us, and I remember like looking through some of them, and this guy caught my name, or this guy caught my attention, and I was like, he's only like a couple blocks from us. Like, let's go peel
Yeah.
over there and let's go give him a Bible. We called him first, and we told him who we were. We told him we had a Bible, and asked if he was home and available to go drop it off. And we said yeah, or he said yeah. And so we go over there. We park our car, and he's standing outside of his house with his door open, just standing right next to the door, just waiting for us. And very ominously, and it was weird because I mean, we're in the hood, like we're in the ghetto. We don't
Yeah.
know what's going on. Like several of these apartments have to be used as like trap houses, like we know. But he has his door open and he just kind of ushers us with his hand, doesn't say anything. And we step into his apartment and we're like, what's about to happen? And we sit down and we give him the Bible, and he said, you know, I looked you guys up and I realized that you guys are the ones that also have the Book of Mormon. Like, tell me more about it.
Hmm.
And we obviously just started with the restoration and kind of told him all about that. And he told us that at one point in he was serving in Angola, Louisiana. It's like one of the craziest hardcore prisons in America. And he read the Book of Mormon while he was in there.
No
And
way.
he ended up telling us later that he had joined just about every single possible church you could think of,
Wow.
like Pentecostal, Seventh-day Adventist, Jehovah's Witness, Baptist, Catholic, Lutheran. Like, he'd been through all of them.
Wow.
And he was just on this journey, you know, still at 72 years old. He was
Yeah.
committed to finding the truth.
Wow.
And he said, I remember reading the Book of Mormon like while I was in prison and thinking like this was one of the most spiritual, holy texts that I've ever read. And as we taught the restoration, we get to the point of the first vision where Joseph, you know, with Joseph Smith, and we recite that first vision to him. You know, I watched this very tough, hardened, calloused man just break down in tears and lift up his head after a second and just confess to us. He said, I know that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God. And he was baptized 3 weeks later, you know, and one of the most spiritual baptisms of my whole mission. It was so, you know, the gospel is just such a cool thing that me as this, you know, 19-year-old kid, I'm standing in this water with this tough, hardened Cajun man who's 72 years old. He weighs like 130 pounds. Like, he's just been through hell and back. And, you know, I get to be the one to administer like that kind of blessing to him in his life, something that he has spent years and years and years seeking out. And after his baptism, obviously, he progressed towards taking him to the temple for the first time. And we were lucky to have the temple in our mission. And this dude, he spoke like a pastor. Like, if I could imitate his voice, or if I had a recording of him, he had like this deep, poetic, like rhythmic, like how he spoke and whatnot. And I remember leading up, you know, we get to the day where he goes to have his temple recommend interview. And we're outside the hall. He walks in, and probably about like a minute and a half, 2 minutes go by. And all of a sudden, the door opens back up. Without even looking at us, he just walks right past us and walks down the hall and walks outside and walks home. And we just like look at each other, and we look at the bishop as he comes out, and we say like, what happened? Like, well, certainly like he didn't get his recommended.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, what were you guys talking about? And he said, well, I was going through the interview questions, and I got to the part about, you know, being a full tithe payer. And he said, yes. And I went to move on to the next question. And he said, wait, no, like, Bishop, what does it mean to be a full tithe payer? He said, because I remember the elders like taught me that, like when we were going through the baptismal questions. And I said, yes, but like, what does it mean to be a full tithe payer? And he said, well, it just means that, you know, you give 10% of everything. 10% of everything that you earn. And he said, well, then that's not me. And he said, well, I know a little bit of your circumstance, Cornelius. Like, tell me about like your financial situation. And he told the bishop that he was given, $400 a month from the government. And as soon as that hit his account, 300 of it was taken for immediately for his rent, utilities, and all that stuff. And he was left for $100, left $100 left over for the rest of the month that he had to survive on. And, right there, Bishop said, Cornelius, like where it's like it's not your job, like you're not able to make more money than that or whatever. Like I think the Lord would be okay if you paid $10 off of 100 as your tithing, and I'm pretty sure He would accept that offering. And Cornelius stood up and he said, "I will not rob God." And that's the moment he walked out of his office. He went home and he scrounged up whatever like change he could find, and he sold some of his possessions around his house and came back later that day and paid $40 in tithing. And as a result, I think this man had like one of the most spiritual temple experiences that I've ever heard of. We helped him with his family history. The first two names we found for him were his father, Cornelius Burrell Sr., and his brother. And he told us the story. He told us the stories about his father and his brother, which I'll share at the end of this experience. But we take those two names to the temple for his first time to do baptisms for the dead, and he is just stoked. Like, he can't stop talking about it. We get in there, my mission president and his wife are there. He's hugging on them. He's hugging everyone. Like, he's just an angel in there. And, we get to the baptismal font, and we're just sitting there as witnesses. He's got a smile on his face as he looks up at me, and then all of a sudden it's time to get baptized for his father. And he goes down into the water, and he comes back up. And I remember him looking down at the water for the rest of the time that he was in that font. And as soon as he got baptized for his brother, he was lifted back up, and with his head down, he walked out of the font into the locker room. And we were waiting for him to change and whatnot. As soon as he comes out, almost similar to like when he walked out of the bishop's office, just walks right past us, walks right out of the temple doors. And we're trying to catch up to him and be like, "Cornelius, like, where are you going? What happened? Like, what, how was it?" And he didn't say anything. And we'd give him a ride, and he got in the truck with us. This is back when you could like give, other people rides and members, whatever, if they were of your same sex.
Yeah.
And we'd given him a ride. And he didn't say a single thing for that whole car ride home. And we tried texting him after and like, "Hey, is everything okay? Like, we're here to talk." Like, didn't text us. And this was on a Friday night, I believe. And we didn't hear anything from him Saturday. And we get to ward council Sunday morning. And, Bishop asked us like, "Oh, how was Cornelius's experience or whatever?" And we're like, "We don't know." And we told him everything that happened. I was like, "Have any of you guys heard from him?" And he's like, "Well, I saw him this morning, like, outside the doors of the church before I got here at like 6:30. And he's been sitting in the front pews waiting to pass the sacrament since we've been in here." And I asked him if he would share his testimony of his experience today in church, and he said he would. And so, me and my companion look at each other and we're like, this could be anything. Like, this could be really good or really bad, And so we're waiting eagerly. And it comes for his time, gets called up there, and he says, "Brothers and sisters, I just want y'all to know that I have a testimony of the temple, and that is the house of the Lord." And he just starts going in, and he said, "I've never had a spiritual experience like that in my entire life." And he says, "The first person that I was baptized for was my father, Cornelius Burrell Sr. None of you know who that man was. But the entire time that I knew him in this life, he was a drunk. and he would beat my mom and me and my other five siblings senselessly every day when he got home from work. And one time at around 11 years old, I finally decided to stand up to him. As he's beating on my mom, I came up behind him with a broomstick and I hit him as hard as I could. And it didn't do anything to him. And he chased me out of the house, off the porch, and he yelled at me as I was running down the road, "If I ever see you again at this house, I will kill you." And he said, at 11 years old, living in New Orleans, Louisiana, I was homeless for 3 months before my grandparents ended up finding me. And I lived with them on and off until I was about 14 or 15 when I started my gang-related activity. I was in and out of prison and jail from that time forward. And when I went down in that water and when I came out, all I could hear was someone weeping. And I knew right then and there whose voice and whose crying it was, and it was my father. And before he could even get a word out, before the crying stopped, it was time to be baptized for my brother. And he said, "None of you know who my brother was, but my brother was born with Down syndrome, but he lived to be 62 years old, and he never said a word in his entire life. I never heard him speak." And after I was baptized on my brother's behalf, I came up out of that water, and I heard what I knew could only be the voice of my brother for the first time in my entire life. And all I heard him say was, "Thank you, Cornelius, for what you have done for me and for our family today." And, when I came home from my mission, I would call that man up anytime I was having a hard day. And my problems were so much smaller than anything that man has ever faced in his life, and he would put on his pastor suit and he'd just be like, "Brother Wright, why are you worried about money, son? You know how much, there are geniuses in this world who don't know who Jesus Christ is. You are rich," and he would just say stuff like that. And I was like, I can't say anything. This guy has it all figured out. And he was seriously just one of the most spiritual people, that I've ever met. And he lived off of, $60 a month. Every month after that, he's obviously started getting help from like the Bishop's Storehouse with food and whatnot. But there was just never a better, more spiritual example to me of someone who truly loves the Lord and who truly, as the parable of the laborers in the vineyard goes, that all of the laborers who came in at the first, second, all the way to the very last hour to work in the vineyard, I can say with complete and total assurity that man will lose nothing for his reward in the eternities. And I was sad to hear that he passed away a couple years ago, but he was a great man. But that was something that I've taken with me, ever since, especially with tithing. There wasn't a more spiritual, profound experience of the importance of tithing, and it's become something that, of all the things that I've struggled with, keeping, maintaining, striving for, as you said, tithing has been the one thing. No matter how much or how little amount of money I have always been so happy and willing to pay, because I not only have seen the witness of that blessing in his life, but of mine and so many other people's as well. And just, getting rid of the love for money, divorcing myself from the lust of it, and getting an opportunity to rely more on God. And so I will always forever be thankful for that example that he set to me. So,
absolutely. Wes, thank you, dude. Seriously. I know these are so much to unpack there, but I know these are sacred things to you. And, I'll say I never met Cornelius, and you said he was a good man, and he is a good man. And that's the beauty of all of this. You talked about how you quoted him quoting his brother, thank you for what you did for me and our family today.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that word today, that's a time limit, but it's also, there's an assumption of the future there. Right.
Yeah.
And like this
That's
continues
become
on,
unlocked. Yeah.
and it's only midway through the story that you talk about his baptism. Right. And it's like, usually that's the climax of a lot of these missionary stories is, entering the waters of baptism, but it doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
Right. It goes to the temple and the work that is done there that extends it to the eternities and connects
Yeah.
us with our families forever. And no matter what our past looks like, no matter who we are as a person, God asks us for our heart and our desire, right? And you look at a guy like Cornelius who's seen it all
Yeah.
and is still able to refine his desire to get it right with God. And it made me think of an experience I had. I was asking my mission president on my mission for some counsel with a lady that we were teaching. We had been through several lessons with her and her family, and we had talked about baptism and the importance of it, and being baptized through the proper authority. And she hits us with the, I've already been baptized. Why would I need to be baptized again? And so we clearly needed to do some workshopping and make sure we were teaching it correctly so that she could understand. And I was asking my mission president, I'm like, how do I, help her understand that, this is the correct form of baptism, and she needs that authority for her baptism to be valid. And he basically taught me how that's never the approach you should have when talking about these ordinances. Yeah. And although that it's true that you need the priesthood and the authority of God to perform these ordinances, God has a plan for everyone, right? And though it was in another denomination, that baptism was evidence of someone acting in faith and was a step towards their future and their connection to God. And I bring this up in a sense that as gnarly and as intense and as terrible as Cornelius's experience was growing up and, in and out of prison and experiencing all sorts of these things you'd never wish upon your worst enemy, they were steps towards what led to you and your companion as servants in the hands of the Lord, helping him connect the dots.
Yeah.
Right. And you talked about how he had joined all these churches. Like, those were steps of faith trying to get closer to God, And so as important as it is to be baptized through the proper authority, it's also important to recognize the importance of someone's path and how all of that plays a role into where we are today. And I think if we remind ourselves that, we would have a lot more grace in the way that we interact with people, and we don't judge them for their mistakes, and we don't judge them for even the way that they are. There's context to every person's situation that usually isn't, you can't see it. Yeah. And it takes a lot of, conversation and stuff to realize that. But anyway, that's kind of an overarching principle that I see with that story there. But I mean, bottom line, thank you for sharing that, dude.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And then, the other one I literally was thinking about talking about, I went a little long-winded on that story, but
oh, dude, worth every second, man.
The other one that I felt impressed to talk about, just especially with the day and age that we live in, with dating and marriage and its purpose and stuff, that slowly but surely kind of being dissolved and lost in society. That a lot, obviously, especially returned missionaries, are very concerned with. And you look at the statistics associated with marriage rates, plummeting, whatnot, divorce rates maintaining, and stuff like that. Me coming from a broken home, coming from divorced parents, as soon as I figured out what was wrong with me, or what I was missing out on, I would say, growing up, I became very acutely aware and began to analyze other people's families. You know, my best friends' families, especially when I'd go over there to their house. I don't know why I would always find myself, if my friends were downstairs, like hanging in the basement. I'd find myself oftentimes sitting up at the kitchen table or just sitting around the bar at the sink, you know, watching their moms and their dads, you know, interact with each other, talking with them. And I remember just being so jealous of that. And again, like, as I'll iterate again, I had great parents, but obviously, like, you miss out on something when you miss out on the nuclear family. And
Yeah.
so that became a focal point from that point on, and especially on my mission is, you know, how can I have something that I wasn't afforded growing up? And how can I be serious about giving my kids something that I never had? And I was lucky enough to meet this guy. He was also probably around like 70 years old. His name was Dale Ure, and he was a member in the Tomball Second Ward. He had a couple of his kids who lived in that ward with him. He lived by himself. He was the father of 12 children. His wife passed away when he had, I think, one kid left to go to get out of the house from cancer. And, you know, probably just the weirdest choice of, you know, P-Day activities. Me and my companion, like, very shortly after meeting him in our ward, spent half of our P-Days going over to his house after we got everything done during the mornings and just listening to him and just like him telling us stories and just, you know, teaching and expounding on, you know, scripture and asking us different questions about life and, you know, our purpose and you know, controversial things, especially like the family and whatnot. And I loved it because this man like had what I wanted. And before I met him, like, I never wanted to have like a lot of kids, and, you know, I didn't even know if that was in the cards for me or whatever. But I feel like I should share this, especially because of, you know, Dallin H. Oaks, you know, like last address, or when he talked about having more kids and whatnot, where we declined, and kind of families are becoming, as he said, you know, units of economic consumption, and as opposed to units of economic production.
Yeah.
And, you know, this man, as I would ask him like about his family and the way that he talked about his wife, like, this man like truly loved her and would do anything for her, and he would do anything for his kids, and his kids all loved him, and all of his grandkids just adored him. And I was just like, man, like, this is what I want. And I talked to him about the challenges of having like a big family. You know, like a lot of the narratives that are pushed in like today's world, it's like, oh, well, kids are expensive.
Yeah.
And, you know, I remember asking him that, and he's like, well, why? Why do you think kids are expensive? And I was like, because they like cost money. He's like, what are you spending money on? And he just like very critically just kind of like dismantled my argument. And he's like, you know, parents nowadays think that in order to, you know, that the kind of quality of life that your kid needs is being able to take them to Disneyland twice a year, being able to take them all on these, you know, crazy vacations and excursions alongside doing that for yourself. You're like, oh, I don't want to miss out on being able to go fly to, you know, the Bahamas, you know, whenever I want, or having like girls trips and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he said, like, so much of what people think makes like a family or having kids expensive is based on like the perceived lifestyle that they want to maintain. Yeah. And he said that if you are serious and genuine about your kids being raised in the best way possible and having, you know, experiences that will last a lifetime that they'll never forget, you'll realize that so much of what that takes doesn't require money. And he said, you know, you can go ask my kids, you can go walk down the street to their houses and ask them about some of the most memorable things we did as family were. And they'll tell you things that cost almost nothing. You know, whether it was camping out in our backyard, whether it was like taking a trip like on Saturday afternoons after a hard day of yard work in the morning, whatever, just going and getting sodas.
Yeah.
And like they truly don't know the difference between, camping in your backyard and going to Hawaii. Like kids
Yeah.
don't. And it made me think like, oh yeah, like a lot of the things that I remember from my childhood are things that you couldn't put a price on. They
Right.
didn't require any money. And he said the other thing you have to understand is if you believe in a loving God who wants us to bring children into this world, like why wouldn't you put a lot of the burden on him to like provide? It's like if I can live within the confines of my covenants and I can follow the Spirit and getting a job and try and provide for my family and make ends meet, provide for the necessities and things like that, pay my tithing, he said, every single time like he showed up. And my kids wanted for nothing. And the next question I asked him was, well, a lot of the other reason that like parents talk about not having too many kids because you can't give every single one of them enough attention.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he challenged me. He said, what does that mean? What does like enough attention mean? And he's like, because if we're just talking about giving the absolute most amount of attention, why not just have one? And then you can give all of the attention that you would give to your child to just one. Does that make them better? Like, our kids, our only children, better off than the kids that come from families of multiple siblings and stuff? And he's like, well, no. And he said, okay. So then let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Like, you're challenging. Like, I want to challenge you on the idea that having 12 kids, I couldn't give them enough attention or that they were somehow deprived in one way. And he asked me, he said, do you think God has abandoned us here on this earth? And I was like, no. He's like, you'd be crazy to think that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we live out of his presence. But we still have a belief and testimony that God is our loving Heavenly Father. So how is it possible? And he said, one of the greatest ways that I have been able to see God's love and God's plan for not only me, but for all of us here on this earth is by having a lot of children and by getting to watch them help one another and serve one another in various and greater capacities than if they were completely dependent upon me or their mother to do those things for them. He said, just for a quick example, like, if child number 6, and I didn't know like their name, so he just said that, if child number 6 came up to me and was like, Dad, like, where's my backpack? I need it for school. And he's like, I don't know, go ask number 1. Or if number 8 came to me and was like, Dad, like, I'm hungry. And he's like, go ask number 3 to make you a bowl of cereal or something like that. Or, and he said like other parents would push back on that and say that's neglecting your child because like they want something from you. He said, do you know how powerful and profound it was to be able to watch your children serve one another and do those things for each other? Do you know the kind of impact that it has had on them long since they have left the house? He said, because they learned how to deal with one another, help, serve, love one another within the confines of my household, there's absolutely nothing that could spread them apart now. They are closer together. That's why they're willing to live like in the same neighborhoods as each other, like be in the same wards as each other. We still have family reunions. We don't have hardly any contention and stuff like that. And it's because they all learned how to love and take care of one another.
Yeah.
And he said the last thing that I'll say is a lot of the reasons why parents fail in this life and why families fail is because like they get the totem pole of priorities mixed up or backwards. Like God, our Father, should always be our first and greatest priority individually for all of us. Like that's independent of wherever you're at in life, whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you have kids. He should always be your greatest priority. When you get married, your spouse becomes your second. When you have kids, your kids become your third. But a lot of the times what you see in life is that as soon as children are introduced into the household, it flips.
Yeah.
God goes out the window, your spouse goes out the window, and your children become just like the center of your attention and the center of your world. He said, children need us to survive, but like you are crazy if you think that forsaking God and forsaking your spouse is the best way to keep them alive and what's going to do the most for them in the long run. Yeah. And so, long story short, I didn't even really realize just how profound this was until like I came home and started seeing a lot of things that I've seen in the world since, in my only 8 years since, and why Dallin H. Oaks prefers to give an address talking about how members of the church need to have more children, regardless of how controversial that might be for members or for the rest of the world to hear. Because he understands, as God always has, that like the things that matter most in this life are what last the longest, and that will always be our families. And so that would just be something for me, for those of you who are watching, like as missionaries, whether you're going out or you're coming home. It's all about the family, and it's like all about how you can be the best husbands, fathers to your children, your spouses and whatnot, and how being a disciple of Jesus Christ maximizes your ability to be able to be those things. So that was just another thing that I felt prompted to talk about. That again, I it's very even controversial to me, because people ask me, they're like, "Oh, Wes, you're 29 now. How many kids do you want?" I'm like, "I want 10 kids." Yeah. And they're like, "Are you crazy?" But I'm like, I'm serious, man. Like I've seen it. I've seen it in other families. I've seen it in his, and I just think there's no greater blessing, and people are gonna be able to bookmark this and be like, "Oh, we'll see when he starts having kids how many he wants." It's like, maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't know. So.
It shows where your heart is at and where we need to what we need to work towards. It's almost like you could frame the conversation you had with this member with like through prayer with God. I think that there's a lot of parallels there with how God looks at us as his children, mm-hmm. right? And you read it in the scriptures, when we're in the service of our fellow being, we're in the service of God. And I'm sure he's up there smiling every time that we're serving our neighbor, right? Serving our brothers and sisters. And I think the family experience is one of very few things we get to experience in mortality that is divine, mm-hmm. right? And that's why it's so unifying. And, I recently had a conversation with a buddy of mine who is one of my greatest role models in life. He is so legit and is a gnarly, like, extreme sports guy. Mm-hmm. Does all sorts. We grew up skiing together. He's a gnarly, like, skydiver, does, like, wingsuits, all of the craziest things as far as, like, adrenaline junkie, mm-hmm. is always pushing the limits of that. And we recently had a conversation, about, where we like what gets us stoked, and a lot of the time I share a lot of interest with him. Like, I love skiing, and that gets me excited for life, and I know you have all sorts of hobbies that mm-hmm. get you stoked, but you get maxed out. Yeah. In what we can, I think, experience as mankind, and he was just saying how he's like, dude, I've reached the limit. Like, I can continue to chase that, but there's this, like, drive in you when you get to, whether it's sooner or later, where you start to realize that one of the craziest things you can do is get married. Yeah. And pursue a relationship that's risky. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people get scared of it, and I was scared of it, because it opens up this realm of love that is, you could risk losing it. Yeah. Right? It's like, why endeavor in something that you might just lose? Because it sucks when it does lose. And there's so many people that experience that, and we've all on some degree experienced mm-hmm. that and will experience it. But that's not a reason not to do it. And I told my buddy, I'm like, dude, I haven't done nearly as gnarly stuff as he has, but the gnarliest thing I've done is get married and have a kid. Yeah. Like, I'll tell you what, bro, like, when my baby was born, like that is a feeling that I will never be able to put into words.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's like, but the most unique thing about it, and I love where this conversation is going, by the way. But one of the most unique thing about it is I remember like hearing, and I guess the parallel to a mission here is, you know, you have this expectation. You talked about how you heard people's mission stories, and that's what you're looking for and expecting, right? And I remember like people saying like, "Oh, dude, when your baby grabs your finger for the first time, it's like this love that you just will not be able to put into words or you've never experienced before."
Yeah.
And though I had a similar experience to that, it was more the experience I had with my wife. It was really bizarre in a sense that like, obviously I had this like crazy instant amount of love for my kid, but like the connection that I had with my wife, it's like you're bound together through this kid. Like there's nothing that could like there's evidence of like this love, you know? And so anyway, I'm very early stages of this, you know, of experiencing fatherhood, but like I said, it's divine. And I think Heavenly Father is giving us a glimpse into his relationship with us and with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
You know, that's the bottom line, is we have an opportunity to partake in something that's somewhat similar. And I know that's controversial in saying that we believe in becoming like God is something people don't like to hear online right now, but it's something that I'm so stoked to believe that, and it gives me a lot of hope for eternity and what's to come. But yeah,
dude. Yeah. I mean, one thing I thought about when you're like, when you talk about like being, you know, getting married and, you know, having a child with someone like that, that's, you know, the scariest thing you can do. It's like, it truly is. But it's also, you know, something I've said a lot is like all of us assume like the same risk, like in love. And it's like none of us are naive enough to believe that it's not something worth pursuing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you look at the risks, you look at other examples of what to do, what not to do, and what not, and you ultimately have to choose like to assume the same risk and make the same leap of faith that so many other people have, because hopefully you know it's available, like through scripture. And, you know, the other thing that, you know, as you were referencing, I think it's in Mosiah, it's like, you know, you're only in the service of your God when you're in the service of your fellow man.
Yeah.
It's, you know, when God says in I think Moses or the book of Abraham, when he says, you know, Moses 139, for this is my work and my glory, to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man. Like, think about what he's saying, like this is. Yeah. To think of he's outside, you know, physically of this realm of existence that we're in, and how he achieves that is by allowing us and leaving us to one another to help guide one another back in our spiritual and eternal progression. And, you know, any other earthly existence or any other earthly example like that or whatever, people would be like, oh, that's a deadbeat dad. It's like, but he is there in spirit. When you call on him and ask him, he is divinely orchestrating things all the time for our good, in our favor. And he is so willing to allow us to have our free agency and willing to allow friction to occur between so many of us, because again, there is no other way to learn about the kind of life that he is, there that he has, and learn more about his character and nature than by allowing us to experience these things with each other. And I think ultimately that's what a lot of parents, you know, when they attempt to like intervene too much with their children, and they attempt to try and just do everything for them, you ultimately get in the way of allowing them to have the same experience that you've needed. That's been, you know, it's been what it has been because of trial and suffering and struggle and whatnot. And you couldn't be the person you are today without it. And so, allowing, you know, yourself and, or, you know, them to have siblings and whatnot and help each other along in that way, it's like, it's truly a beautiful thing. Yeah. And again, I think that is just Satan's tool of cheapening this experience of life, because it's like if none of it contributes towards living the kind of life that God lives, then again, it just like cheapens and depreciates the experience and like what we're attempting to do. You know, if all of this stuff is meaningless in its desired effect that God has, like, what are we doing it for?
Yeah.
Why would God, say that he has created us in his image? Why would God say, in like 2 Peter 1, I think it is, when it says we can be partakers of the divine nature, when that we are the children of God, and if children, then heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ, and that he has a place for us like on his throne, and he gives us power, procreative power,
Yeah.
to be able to experience, a fraction, a sliver of the kind of life that he lives. We get to have, as many children as he'll allow us to, or, as we want. Here, it pales in comparison to us as his children that he's created, spiritually. And again, like I that is just one of the greatest things that is deep in my testimony of this life and its purpose, and especially of family and its necessity, its superpower, and to cure so many of the ailments of our society today. And I truly think that one of the main reasons that President Oak said what he did was because, there was so few people now like believing in this and practicing it. We as Latter-day Saints have a unique responsibility, to attempt to combat that curve.
Yeah.
And reinstill in the world the nuclear family and its blessings and the privileges associated with it. So,
love that. So good, dude. Such an insightful conversation, and I feel like I've learned so much from you, just from your wisdom and some of these experiences. I want to say to the audience, for those that are listening, Wes and I have talked about a lot of different things and different principles, but bottom line is this is the message that you are going to share as a missionary and as a representative of Jesus Christ. Like, you don't even need to be a full-time missionary, but this is what you need to get excited for. This is the hope that you bring to people like Cornelius and like these other individuals. And people will need that message so bad. They need it so bad. And to be able to have it throughout our lives, right? We're so casual about it, and I think we take it for granted more times than we should. Another thing I wanted to highlight with some of the stories you shared, mostly with Cornelius, is just like his urgency, right? It was like that's what was so stark with you and your companion witnessing it, is it's like you have this expectation of how someone should act when they start to experience God. Yeah. And sometimes it looks different for people. And I think for when it's such a stark contrast from them like experiencing such a low to such a high, like the urgency naturally that happens there is like, it can be jarring to witness, but it's also inspiring to be like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, you talk about the prioritizing thing, and it's like, tithing is such an interesting principle that it's sharing, and that he didn't feel good enough to say that he's giving 10%. It's like, it's so much more than money. It represents so much more than money. Like, we are to give everything to God. If he really is number one, getting on our knees and saying a prayer and thanking him for the food that we have and the family that we have and the support that we have is the least that we can do, And so, I don't know, man, so much to unpack.
Yeah. And I'll just say off of that the urgency that you talked about, with all the things that we take for granted in life. Cornelius is at the end of his life. He's 72 years old. He has no idea how many years he has left.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting that if you and I knew that we only had like a couple of years left, like today, how much differently would we live?
Yeah.
And that was evident in how he reacted and how he treated hearing the messages of the gospel and the Spirit testifying and witnessing of its reality.
Yeah.
It's like, holy crap, I have gone my entire life without this, and it's now at my doorstep. I have the opportunity to accept it and receive of the blessings and the fruits associated with it. I can't miss out on this for any longer.
Yeah.
And his desire to be baptized in 3 weeks, you know? And the other thing that you read, for instance, with how casual we are, that I also want to say to, missionaries, so much of the reason why I chose to begin posting a lot of the stuff that I do, like I love posting my life, I love golf, I love dancing, I love fashion, I love whatever. But when I really made the switch to emphasizing posting about the gospel, is because I realized how guilty I was of that casualty.
Yeah.
I realized I was guilty of taking something that is unique to me and 16 other million members, whatever, on this earth compared to the 8 billion that there are. If I truly do believe that it was, God's, gift to me to be able to be born in this family, born in this wonderful state, born in this blessed country and whatnot, I would think that I would need to have a little bit more urgency and desire to share and proclaim something that if I do believe other people are missing out on it, why wouldn't I at least invite them for the opportunity to learn about themselves?
Yeah.
And even for them to to see within me, of all the things that God has blessed me with the ability to do, to play college football, to be good at golf, whatever it may be, whatever people may want to associate with me, that at the end of the day, being a disciple of Jesus Christ, no matter how hard I struggle with it and how sinful I still am and how many things I still have to change and overcome in my life, it's my greatest priority. And there's nothing more important to me. And I realized how I was deceived after years of being home from my mission into thinking that the gospel wasn't as cool as it is. It wasn't as necessary. And that is just the very thing that I am trying to combat and push back on, just like you are, and having the desire to start this podcast, is that it's so necessary. And if I can help as many people, young men and women that come home from their missions, and understanding that there is no greater endeavor, there is no greater, more worthwhile pursuit in this life than pursuing the opportunity to become perfected through the atonement of Jesus Christ. And it's needed now more than ever, in ways that I couldn't have even imagined a year ago when I just started posting this stuff. If I had time to go through the countless messages that I've gotten from people, perfect strangers, and also people that I know and have known for a long time, that you would have no idea just how much they are starving, and thirsting for what we have.
Yeah.
And when you come to understand and take responsibility for that urgency to proclaim the blessing that you have been freely given, your life really will change. And that's the message that I want to give, to everyone watching this as well, is that it's not just possible, it's necessary. And no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, no matter who you think you are, you have a greater identity than you are now capable of accepting. But, if you will never give up, and if you will always strive for those things, you will have them. And God will help you become something you could never imagine, something you could never be on your own. And those are my greatest desires, not only for myself personally, but for as many people as within the sound of my voice, or as many people as I have the opportunity to try and touch and impact in my life. So,
that's a perfect way to end, man. I think so much inspiration. I feel this. This sense of urgency now, dude. And this is the power of even talking about these things that can kind of help you wake up, and you've done such a good job at sharing your faith and your testimony through your gifts and through your voice. And you inspire me, and I know you inspire a lot of our friends and people within our circle, but a lot of people who go unseen online, who are just watching a lot of the stuff. So just keep it up, bro. Yeah. Like, you're an inspiration, and hopefully those watching can will take notes and take to heart what Wes has shared today. I mean, this is real stuff, and God is aching that we turn to Him and seek these blessings, because they're there for everyone, and everyone is has access to Jesus Christ and His atonement, like you said, no matter where we're coming from. And although you mentioned how your problems after your mission weren't nowhere near what your friend Cornelius experienced, but that doesn't mean that they weren't real to you and they weren't important to you. And I think if you're watching and you're struggling with something, and maybe it's keeping you from making that decision to go on a mission, it doesn't mean that God doesn't care. He wants you. He wants your help. He wants you to have these experiences that set you up for your life. And the bottom line is, a mission is a great way to kind of catapult you into life. Gives you the tools to at least strive to live a good life. Yeah. So, Wes, thank you so much, bro.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll give you the mic if you have anything else to kind of wrap this up on, and we'll.
Two things. You can lose nothing and gain everything by going on a mission. To those individuals who are thinking about going out, and it'll truly will bless and impact your life in ways you couldn't even imagine long after you've came home. And your mission is not to make you perfect. It's to, again, illuminate the fact that the gospel works, because you spend either a year and a half or 2 years every single day getting to witness what the highest spiritual version of yourself looks like, acts like, feels like, behaves like. And then when you get home, again, like I said, it's the illuminated path forward, that whether you're on it or not at different points in your life, you know exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
You know what it looks like. You know what it feels like. And it's this constant ability and gift to be able to compare and contrast the life that you might be living and the life that you maybe could be or should be living.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the realization that it's real, and it works.
Yeah.
And I don't buy into the farce for a second that is people saying that, oh, you can never experience or feel the Spirit as much as you did on your mission. That is a total lie.
Yeah.
You can feel and experience it as much as you are willing. Because how cheap would that be of God to, dangle this proverbial carrot over our heads for 2 years and saying, this is the last time you'll ever get to feel this way. It's literally just a sliver. Yeah. If you're willing to come home and implement, the same practices and same spiritual desires, you're not going to have an hour of personal study every day. You're not going to have an hour of companionship study every day. You're not going to be able to go and knock doors and share the gospel every single day. But the details of what it's like to be as a missionary, and waking up every single morning, saying your prayers, giving some time to God every single day to study the scriptures, no matter how that may be, and asking in prayer to God to help you plan out, someone somewhere who needs what you have to hear, or being able to be introduced to someone or something that you need for that day. Every single day can have as much purpose and meaning when you come home as it did on the mission. And I have seen that every single day that I'm willing to offer that up in my prayers. And the last thing that I'll share is, I don't want anyone to think that I share the things that I do on social media, or I come on podcasts like this because I have it figured out. This life is hard for a reason. so much why I've chose to come on here and to do the things that I attempt to do is not a proclamation of something that I have figured out or a life that I currently live. It's a life that I'm pursuing, and it's a lifestyle that is only available through the example of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I do these things to have more prevalent reminders in my life of who I want to be and who I need to be and who others, want to be as well. And it's almost sometimes feels like faking it till you make it, because there is no one that is more acutely aware of my inadequacies and my mistakes and my sins than I myself am. I am my greatest critic. It is the hardest thing to reconcile those inadequacies and the things that I struggle with still attempting to try and live this life of discipleship. But unlike at times past in my life, when I have chose to forsake God and I have chose to be the one to try and give myself consequences for sin, and I have shamed myself into years of silence between me and him, I know that the greatest thing that I can do when I mess up is to repent as quickly and as sincerely as I can to God, to anyone I may have hurt or offended, and to allow God to be the one to dictate the path of my life. Allow me to feel guilt and consequences for things that I've done naturally, but not beyond anything that he wouldn't want me to feel.
Yeah.
And shame that he would never use. That was one thing I learned last year. Anytime you read through the scriptures, you can look at all the ways that God has punished his children for sin and disobedience. He's used pestilence, he's used famine, he's used drought, he's used flooding, fire, he's taken firstborns, he's used death. The one thing that God has never, ever, ever used as a consequence or punishment for sin is shame. And any time that you are tempted to feel shame for something, it is always and always will be the adversary who's attempting to make you feel this way. Yeah. Feel godly remorse and feel godly sorrow, but understand that it's only an attempt to get you to return back to him, that he may heal you. And I just want to testify of the great redemption and healing that has taken place in my life, that he has offered me and that is available to you and to anyone, anywhere, anytime. So that's last thing I wanted to say.
Love that. Wes, thank you. Thank you. Seriously, this has been one of, I don't know, I didn't realize how much I needed this conversation for real. And I hope that those listening or watching can think about the things that you shared today, can think about the way that they felt as they heard it, hopefully, and we can all leave feeling a little more urgency to repent, to be better, to look to God and live right. And yeah, man, I'm stoked to watch this back and keep learning from you. Yeah. But Wes, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for allowing me to come on and for everything you do and just the noble desire that it is amongst all the things that you could be doing with your time, to be, using your house as a studio like this and pursuit of having conversations like this that are so desperately needed in the world. So I know that God has blessed you immensely for that, and he will continually, and I just can't thank you enough for the example you are to me, Noah.
Yeah. Sure, dude. Well, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, so this is what it's all about, man. We're just trying, just living one day at a time. But this has been Wes serving in the Texas Houston mission. Go check him out, Wes Fun Bro, on all platforms, and
Instagram, TikTok.
Yes,
you're gonna see some dancing.
Yes, sir.
You're gonna
a little bit of everything from this guy, bro.
Fool, yeah, comedic stabs. I don't know. I like to have fun with it.
Yes,
Embarrassment is an unexplored emotion, and I think you should try and experiment with it and feel it as much as possible.
dude, I love it. Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yep.
That's what's up. Well, thank you all for watching. This has been Wes, serving in the Texas Houston mission, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.